emanation, two processes come into play: the evolution and the production. The differences between the two processes is rather significant and must be clearly understood. The process of production is dependent on the process of evolution in sequence of causation, but not in sequence of time. Evolution depends on the creation point for cause, but production is dependent on evolution. Evolution connotes spiritual progress and production signifies material growth and change, organic or inorganic. It is scientifically acknowledged fact that the stellar regions, planets, and stars do exert an influence on the life and activity of this planet, the Earth. And since this Earth of ours has the highest evolved organic life, the human happens to be the nearest the spiritual plane. The phenomenon of eclipse does indirectly affect the world spiritually. The rishis of old knew too well the astronomical basis and the spiritual influence of such an heavenly occurrence. Looking at the average mentality of the masses of their time, the rishis could do no better than issue cut and dried instructions as to prayers, penance, and austerities, investing the whole affair with a religious importance rather than give a rational and spiritual elucidation. In course of time, the religious do's and don'ts of the wise rishis were very cleverly woven round by self-seeking priests with a picturesque and awe-inspiring legends of the gods, demons, nectar, the moon in travail, and its subsequent moksha, freedom for purposes too patent to thinking minds. Such legendary superstitions persist and flourish with ignorance and illiteracy. But now people are daily outgrowing such childish beliefs. There is, however, no denying the fact that a few prayers and ordeals undergone with keen concentration concurrently with the eclipse of the sun or moon do result in great spiritual benefit to the individual concerned. Meher Baba Journal, Volume 1, Number 4, February 1939, pages 76 to 77.
All right. Jai Baba. See, we had done a part of this when we were discussing about astrology, astronomy, and stuff like that. So, in short, Baba says that there is a scientific basis of these occurrences which we call as eclipse, and they have their own importance, but we have given them much more importance than what they deserve. And at one place else, Baba did say that everything is within us. That means all the planets, entire creation, all the planes of consciousness, and even God himself, if we call him himself. In other words, from the standpoint of truth, all these that we see and experience outside of us is actually within us. Baba says that it is not that you are in the cosmos, which means the creation, as much as the cosmos is within you. So with that bent in mind, now let us see, let us try to read this Baba's. Okay. On eclipse of the sun and of the moon and the sun, the astronomical phenomena, the eclipse of the moon or the sun, visibly stirs the Hindu world into religious activity. We all know that during certain eclipse, the mostly Hindus. Even there are other communities like Parsis and others who also get into a lot of activity. And Baba says that in a sense, it is true that within those time period, if you said a certain mantra or a certain prayers with full concentration, not as a matter of ritual, then it does help us spiritually. Why is such an occurrence as an eclipse deemed opportune for a fresh flux of religious fervor, particularly in the matter of perfecting some mantras? So Baba is asking this question, why is it that these occurrences are given so much of importance, especially with regard to mantras? Baba says the eclipse is purely an astronomical phenomena and needs no explanation. There is, however, a germ of spiritual truth. That means there is some spiritual truth behind the grossly colorful imaginary. Grotesquely in the grotesquely. Okay, what does it mean here? Have you got that? Basically, what it means is uh, okay, sorry, loud, colorful, making much ado about certain things behind colorful imagery. Okay, Soumya is prompting me distorted, unnatural. But basically, yeah, correct. Distorted, unnatural, loud, more than what it requires, what importance it requires. Colorful imagery of gods and demons, their squabbles, that is their fights, infighting and all that, and jealousies for the nectar of immortality, all ingeniously concocted by the priest class to flabbergate the superstitious masses and incidentally to fleece them. In other words, what Baba is trying to say is that the priest class has concocted all kinds of stories, all kinds of, uh, you can say imagery stories and all that. And in order to flabbergate, in order to flabbergast the masses and also to fleece them so that they can tell a story that this is what happened, that is what happened, and this is the fight going on, these are the jealousies going on, and that will affect your life also. And if you don't want to be affected, then you have to pay so and so that I can do a certain puja and you will be not affected negatively, but you will gain some benefit out of it. So that is basically what Baba is trying to connote. The spiritual aspect of the question is this: the whole universe, known and unknown, has come out of a point in the microcosm which may be called the creation point. What is creation point? Creation point is a finite point within the infinity of this what we call everything, and through which the creation oozed out, kept pouring out. And the creation is infinite for the simple reason that creation is nothing but the nothingness that is coming out of that one point, which itself, the point is finite, but that point is in the infinity, and because it is in the infinity, the creation also is infinite. That's what Baba explains in more or less similar terms in God Speaks, that there is everything, and that everything is everything, and that everything cannot be everything unless there is also a nothing in that everything, and that nothing is the point, what we call as the home point or the creation point, and what oozed out of that nothing is nothing but nothingness. And because the everything is limited, and therefore the creation, which is a shadow of that everything, is also infinite and unlimited. I'm sorry, everything is unlimited. I beg your pardon. Everything is unlimited, but that point is limited, and the creation is unlimited because it's a shadow of that everything. We won't go deep into that. So here Baba says it's a microcosm which may be called the creation point or the Om point. Simultaneously with this emanation, two processes come into play. Now, with the moment creation started, two processes came into play. Baba says one is the evolution and the other is the production. Evolution, production. The differences between these two processes, is rather significant and must be clearly understood. The process of production is dependent upon the process of evolution in sequence of causation. In other words, evolution is caused first and then the next sequence is production. In my understanding of things, basically what Baba is trying to say is that there is first the evolution and then the production. Again, in my understanding, evolution of what? Evolution of consciousness. Production of what? Production of forms or bodies. So in other words, in the process of sequencing, the evolution precedes the production. So here Baba says the production is the process of production is dependent on the process of evolution in sequence of causation, cause, but not in sequence of time. In other words, now this is a little tricky to understand. We'll go into a little deeper into this. Production is dependent on evolution. That we understood. Production is dependent on evolution. Evolution connotes spiritual progress, and production signifies material growth and change, organic or inorganic. In other words, production, although in sequence of causation, is dependent upon evolution, but production in sequence of time is not dependent upon evolution. This is my understanding that once the form is evolved, once the production takes place, this is again my understanding that how the karmas of individual bodies keep on changing, and therefore in sequence of time it is not dependent on evolution, but in sequence of causation it is dependent upon evolution. It is scientifically acknowledged fact that the stellar regions of the stars and planets and all that, planets and stars do exert an influence on the life and activity of this planet, the Earth. That means there is some truth in the fact that the constellations, the zodiacs, the nakshatra, whatever you call it, do have an influence on life in the planet Earth. And since this Earth of ours has the highest evolved organic life, the human happens to be the nearest to the spiritual plane. Baba has said that there are planets where life exists. There are planets where gases are there, where stones there, metals, minerals there, vegetation is there, and even human beings are there. But Earth is the most spiritually advanced planet. It is only on Earth that we find the perfect masters. It is only on Earth that the avatar takes the avtaran, or he descends. It is only on Earth that the inner spiritual path or the evolutionary journey is available, and it is only from Earth that one gets union with the beloved, union with God by way of either God realization or by way of mukti. The phenomenon of eclipse does indirectly affect the world spiritually. Indirectly. Why it is said indirectly? Because Baba had elsewhere said that a human being has such spiritual potentiality or potential that it can defeat its own stars. Stars means its own takdeer. It can defeat it through the human potential because we have that spiritual hathiyar by way of which we can defeat our planets. The rishis of the old knew too well the astronomical basis and the spiritual influence of such an heavenly occurrence. That means they knew that what is the effect of such occurrences on human beings. Looking at the average mentality of the masses of their time, the rishis could do no better than issue cut and dried instructions as to prayers, penance, and austerities, investing the whole affair with a religious importance rather than give a rational and spiritual elucidation. In short, what Baba is trying to say is that the rishis and the priest class of that time, knowing the human mentality of that time, concocted a lot of stories and stuff like that and gave it a religious coloring rather than giving it a scientific or a spiritual basis. In course of time, the religious do's and don'ts of the wise rishis were very cleverly woven round by self-seeking priests with a pictures and awe-inspiring legend of the gods, demons, nectar, the moon in travail, and its subsequent moksha, freedom, for purposes too patent to thinking minds. In other words, same thing that the priest class has now woven all this into a religious admixture because people have that mindset, and so the priest also encourage that mindset in order to fleece the humanity. Such legendary superstitions persist and flourish with ignorance and illiteracy. But now people are daily outgrowing such childish beliefs. In other words, now people have realized that these are all stories, these are all a make-believe kind of thing. Basically, eclipse is nothing but something which is scientific, and that's about all. However, Baba says there is no denying the fact that a few prayers and ordeals undergone with keen concentration, that means with a real focus, concurrently with the eclipse of the sun or moon, do result in great spiritual benefit to the individual concerned. So, in other words, to round up in a very nutshell, Baba says that there's no denying that eclipse is a scientific fact. There is no denying that it does have an indirect effect on planet Earth and everybody in planet Earth. There is also no denying that if during those periods certain prayers are done with concentration, it will benefit spiritually to humanity. So that is the chapter on, yeah, sorry, Mer Baba Journal, Volume 1, Number 4, February 1939, pages 76 and 77. Do we go on to the next one on consciousness and planes? We'll do this, and then if there are any questions, we'll look at it. On consciousness and planes.
Is consciousness we are aware of in human form the same in all the spiritual planes? The unfoldment of consciousness in the lower evolutionary stages, mineral, vegetable, and animal, is perfected in the human form. The consciousness you have now in the human form continues the same throughout all the spiritual planes, the subtle, mental, and supramental. There is this difference. In the lower evolutionary process, culminating in the human, the consciousness at various stages differs in point of degree. It is a continuous process of unfoldment, always progressive, resulting in the full and complete consciousness of the human form. In the planes, however, The perfected consciousness of the human remains the same, but its scope or field of play becomes extensively extended. For instance, you are now conscious only of the gross plane, the subtle and mental worlds you are not aware of. Likewise, one in the subtle plane has consciousness of the subtle world only and is not conscious of the gross and the mental. Also, one in the mental plane has the consciousness of the mental plane only and is not aware of the gross or the subtle. One in the seventh plane, the supramental, the plane of perfection, has consciousness of all the planes, the mental, the subtle, and the gross. You can thus see how the consciousness of the human form obtains throughout, and the field of play varies not in degree but in depth and extensiveness. In evolution, there is a definitely determinable difference in the various stages of consciousness, which is an incessant and persistent state of unfoldment, resulting in the all complete consciousness of the human form. In the higher planes, although this consciousness remains the same, there is infinite difference between the consciousness of the subtle and mental, mental and supramental. This difference is sharp and defined, as there is no point of fusion or expansion as that which exists when the consciousness was unfolding. It is on this account that one in the subtle plane identifies himself with that plane and deems this consciousness to be perfection. Similarly, one in the mental plane identifies himself with the mental plane, and the consciousness hereof is considered as perfection. It is no perfection at all. It is an illusion, rather self delusion. You can understand now why one gets stuck in the plane where one is. It is extremely difficult for such as one to to, to step into the mental plane from the subtle. It is impossible for one to go from the mental into the supramental unless held by a perfect master. There is as much difference between the consciousness in extensiveness of the sixth and the seventh plane as that between an ant and a human being. The seventh plane connotes perfection. Here, one becomes consciousness itself. Meher Baba Journal, Volume 1, Number 6, April 1939, pages 32 33.
The chapter is on consciousness and planes. Planes of consciousness. Baba explains in God Speaks that there are 7 planes of consciousness, 6 of which are in the domain of illusion, and the 7th is the real, in the domain of reality or truth, and that is the real plane. Kadambari, can you just mute your mic, please?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you. Now, as we all know, I'll just go a little, elaborate a little more, that the whole of this game of creation is nothing but the creator wanting to know himself as the creator, as all powerful, as all knowledgeable, as all bliss. And the only way he can do it is to create something entirely opposite to who he is, and that is creation. So in other words, the infinite, in order to know that he is infinite, had to first experience what is finite. And that's how the creation came into being. So there is first the creation, and then there is evolution, which starts all the way from the gases. And the process of evolution ends in the first human form, and then there is reincarnation, and after several births, there is involution, which means inner spiritual journey, the path to God realization, and then finally there is realization, God realization, self-realization. And in the first human form, the consciousness is whole and complete. There is no further expansion of consciousness. Only thing is that consciousness is covered, shrouded like blinkers with all the garbage, the kachra, which we have gathered in our long travail of acquiring full consciousness, which needs to be weeded out gradually over a long period of time. So here Baba says, is consciousness we are aware of in the human form the same in all the spiritual planes? This is the question that is asked. Is the consciousness the same? Human consciousness and in all the spiritual planes? The answer is the unfoldment of consciousness in the lower evolutionary stages, minerals, vegetables, and animals, is perfected in the human form. In other words, the whole original idea, the will to be conscious, is already fructified in the very first human form. So actually, technically, in the very first human form, one should experience the I am God state. But that doesn't happen. Why? Because along with the entire journey, we kept on loading ourselves with samskaras or impressions. The consciousness you have now in the human form continues the same throughout all the spiritual planes. There is no extra additional consciousness. It continues the same throughout all the spiritual planes, the subtle, mental, and supramental. Now, here Baba is using the word supramental. Later on, he has, in a sense, denounced this word supramental, and Baba talks about God consciousness and self realization and all. There is this difference. Consciousness remains the same, but there is this difference. What is the difference? In the lower evolutionary process, culminating in human form, culminating in the humans, the consciousness at various stages differs in point of degree. So here the consciousness differs in point of degree, lower, little bigger, little larger, little more, and then human being. So in lower than human beings, that means the animals, the birds, the fish going backwards, the fish, vegetables, worms and all that, vegetable, um, rocks, stones, metal, minerals, and then the gases. It differs in point of degrees in those cases. It is a continuous process of unfoldment, always progressing, resulting in the full and complete consciousness of the human form. In the planes, however, the perfected consciousness of the human remains the same, but this is important, but its scope or field of play becomes extensively extended. In other words, the scope of that already full and complete consciousness of human being, the scope and the field of play expands as you progress in the inner spiritual world. The consciousness does not. It is not, as Baba says, it is not a difference in point of degree, because now the degree remains constant, full consciousness. Now Baba gives an example. For instance, you are now conscious only of the gross plane. The subtle and mental worlds you are not aware of. See, we are right now in the gross plane. Gross means sthul. It is also known as Anna Bhumika or Sthula Bhumika. Gross means everything gross, not just our earth, not just our solar system, but all the planets, all the stars, all the worlds, all the nebulae, everything that is gross, everything that is matter, it comes in the purview of the gross plane. But we are not conscious right now of the subtle plane, that is the subtle sphere, and the mental sphere. Likewise, yeah, okay, because we can only perceive our world with the five gross senses of perception. Now, there is also beyond the gross, there is what is known as the subtle sphere, and beyond the subtle sphere, there is something called the mental sphere, the mental world, and beyond the mental sphere, there is one that is known as the sphere of reality, or truth, or hakikat, or God, whatever you call it. Right? Baba is using the word supramental over here in this discourse. Likewise, one in the subtle plane has consciousness of the subtle world only and is not conscious of the gross and the mental. Also, one in the mental plane has the consciousness of the mental plane only and is not aware of the gross or the subtle world. One in the seventh plane, the supramental, the plane of perfection, has consciousness of all the planes, the mental, the subtle, and the gross. Now, I'll just try to make it easy for us to understand. One is the gross plane, subtle plane, mental plane. Simple. And the supramental. The one in the gross plane, as we all are, not conscious of the subtle, not conscious of the mental, not conscious of the supramental. Correct? Now, if we progress into the subtle world or the subtle sphere, then a person in the subtle world is only conscious of the subtle sphere, not conscious of the gross, not conscious of the mental, not conscious of the supramental. Now, he progresses further and goes into the mental sphere. In the mental sphere, the person is not conscious of the gross, not conscious of the subtle, not conscious of the supramental. He is only conscious of the mental sphere or mental world. Now, the person who is in the reality, I'm not using the word supramental purposely, he is initially, when in the first stage of God realization, with what we call as the Mazubiyat, he is only conscious of I am God state. He is not conscious of the gross, not conscious of the subtle, not conscious of the mental, only conscious I am God state. But Baba has here jumped straight into supramental, which is a state of perfection, which means what? After having experienced the I am God state, he is again getting back the consciousness of the mental, subtle, and the gross sphere. And therefore, Baba says over here that a person who is supramental has consciousness of I am God state, has the consciousness of the mental, the subtle, and the gross. Yeah. Salik as well as perfect master. Salik as well as the perfect master. Correct. Thank you. You can thus see how the consciousness of the human form obtains throughout, and the field of play varies not in degree but in depth and extensiveness. It is not in degree. It is not the point of degree as it was during the evolutionary process. It was a point in degree. Here, you have already acquired full consciousness. So it is not all the three bodies are now complete, gross, subtle, and mental. So it is not a process of differentiation in degree, but it is in the scope and the field of awareness. Extensiveness, Baba talks about. In evolution, there is definitely determinable difference in the various stages of consciousness, which is an incessant and persistent state of unfoldment resulting in the all complete consciousness of the human form. That means in the pre-human state, the consciousness is determinable and it is incessantly, which means constantly, continuously, perennially getting better and better and better. forward and forward and forward, improved and improved and improved, larger and larger and larger, till it finishes its journey in the first human form. In the higher planes, although this consciousness remains the same, gross human consciousness which you and I have now remains the same. That consciousness does not change. There is infinite difference between the consciousness of the subtle and the mental, similarly mental and the supramental. That means, in other words, it's a difference in the depth and the extensiveness. The field of play, the play field, playground opens up much larger, but the consciousness remains the same. This difference is sharp and defined, as there is no point of fusion or expansion as that which exists when consciousness is unfolding. When the consciousness of the lower planes is gradually unfolding, there is a point of fusion, or means you can pinpoint and say there is a point of fusion. But here, there is no point of fusion. It is very distinct. A gross conscious human being is very distinct from a subtle conscious human being, and from a mental conscious human being, and from a supramental conscious human being. So here the difference is very distinct because there is no point of fusion. That's what Baba is trying to explain. It is on this account that one in the subtle plane identifies himself with that plane. That means a person who is on the first, second, third planes of consciousness, who is in the subtle sphere, who identifies himself as subtle energy, urja, who can create chota mota chamatkar. He identifies himself as energy and not as a gross body, and also not as the mind, and also not as supramental or as God. Similarly, one in the mental plane identifies himself with the mental plane, and the consciousness thereof is considered as perfection. Here I missed out a line where it is on this account that one in the subtle plane identifies himself with that plane and deems this consciousness to be perfection. So here what Baba is trying to say is that the moment you go from the gross to the subtle, you start getting access to certain powers. You can do chota mota chamatkars. And once you start exercising those powers and making use of those powers, there is a very high probability that one may think that I have arrived, or one may think that now I am perfect, or one may think I have become one with God because I have control over the powers to do miracles and to change the so-called destiny, nasib, takdir of anybody. If there is a dry tree and if he just does like this and say it will be full of leaves and fruit. If there is a dry well, he just has to think and the well will be full with water. And any such thing. Even a person on the third plane can bring back to life pre-human species, like animal has died, he can bring it back to life. A bird has died, bring it back to life. A fish is dead, bring it back to life. A person on the third plane. Whereas a person on the fourth plane can even do that with human beings. Dead human beings he can bring back to life. So you can imagine the self-delusion that a person can get, that I am now perfect. I have become one with God. I am God and I can do anything. And that is where you can get a downfall. Baba says that you still are far away from perfection. You see, and therefore even the same thing can happen in the mental world. A person in the mental world gets himself consciousness, and he might, why does he think he is perfect? Because he can read the thoughts and the feelings, the fifth and the sixth plane I'm talking about, of anybody throughout the world. He is not limited by the body. Sitting here in India, he can think, he can know what a person 10,000 miles away, in sitting in America, Australia, New Zealand, what that person is thinking, this person over here can know. Or what that person is feeling, the peer can know sitting over here, who's on the sixth plane. He can change their thoughts. He can manipulate those thoughts and feelings. He can control those thoughts and feelings. He can create, he can create new thoughts and feelings and endorse it in that person's psyche. So that person on the fifth plane, who is called a Wali, and a person on the sixth plane, who is called a Peer, Baba says he can self-delude himself into thinking, I am God. Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay. So Soumya reminds me to say that it is only from the fourth plane, who is known as a Mahayogi or a Kuber. If he misuses the powers of the fourth plane, he goes back. We have done this earlier. The consciousness is shattered, disintegrated, and he has to start all over again from the stone state. But fifth and the sixth plane, there is no retrograde. He doesn't get back. It's a safe plane. But here, this is 1939, where Baba is also, as I said, evolving his thought. Not that evolving, but he's giving it in piecemeal till finally he gave it in God's speech. So here Baba says that it is no perfection at all, but the person on the subtle plane and the person on the mental plane might think or feel that he is perfect. It is no perfection at all. It is an illusion, rather self-delusion. He is deluding himself into thinking and believing that he has perfected himself because he has got the powers to perform miracles in the subtle plane, and because he has got the capacity to read and control and manipulate thoughts and feelings throughout the universe, throughout the world. It's not something sitting here. So you can imagine what sort of feeling that person will be having, that I can do anything, and yet he is not perfect. You can understand now why one gets stuck in the plane where one is. So this is the main reason why, because of self-delusion, the self-delusion that I have arrived at my destination, terminus. I have become God realized. Because of that self-delusion, when somebody tells you you have arrived at the end of your journey, then what happens? You don't make any effort to move forward because you feel, oh, I have arrived. I have arrived at my destination. What is there to go now forward? There is no forward. And that is what Baba says. You can understand now why one gets stuck in the plane where one is. It is extremely difficult for such a one to step into the mental plane from the subtle. From the subtle, it is impossible for one to go from the mental into the supramental unless helped by a perfect master. Baba has been harping on this all through his discourses, all through his books, that you cannot jump from the dream to the awake state, from the dui or the duality to unity or oneness, from ignorance to knowledge, from darkness to light, from illusion to reality. You cannot unless and until you are helped by a living, perfect master or the avatar who is the eternal, living, perfect master. There is as much difference between the consciousness in extensiveness of the sixth and the seventh plane as that between an ant and a human being. See, sixth plane is at the far end, farthest end, almost near touching the reality. But Baba says that the difference between the sixth and the seventh is as much a difference between the consciousness of an ant and a human being. It is such a vast difference, and yet the difference between the sixth and the seventh is that vast, although sixth is so much close. Here, and the seventh plane connotes perfection. Here, one becomes consciousness itself. In other words, in the seventh plane, you become everyone and everything. Everything, that is why we started with the prayer, that everyone and everything. In other words, in the seventh plane, you actually become. Here we are simply saying, you actually become everyone and everything. That experience we cannot even imagine, because it's beyond imagination. Like in the prayer we have, and your knowledge itself, there is nothing to know. You are just knowledge. You are this, you are that. You actually become that. I remember once an incident when Baba was sitting in the Manli hall, and there was an ant which was crawling on the ground, and then Baba is asking the Manli, okay, what do you think is the difference between the consciousness of the ant and the consciousness of you all? The Manli. Okay, sorry. And the Manli. And of course, the Manli said, Yasmin, your mic is on, darling. Yasmin, please
What?
mute your mic, please.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. So the Manli obviously said that there is a world of difference between the consciousness of an ant and the consciousness of the people sitting there, the Manli members. Although both the ant as well as the Manli are sitting on the floor, same ground, same floor, but the consciousness of world, they're incomparable. You can't even compare. You see, it's foolishness to even think of comparing. And Baba then comes out with saying that although I am sitting on the same floor, on the same ground, as you all are sitting, as the Manli is sitting, the difference between your consciousness and my consciousness is much greater, is more vast than the consciousness between the ant and yours. So you can imagine what is that consciousness which Baba talks about in terms of Aham Brahmasmi, Analhag, Soham, God realization, self-realization, whatever you call it. So perfection. So that is the difference. So here we end the second session as well. Any questions here?
Jai
Yes,
Baba.
Cyrus.
Jai Baba.
Yeah. Jai Baba.
Yes. Yes, Cyrus uncle. It's like five senses. Is it
Yes,
something
good.
like that?
Something of
The,
what?
the first topic what you spoke, is it something like the the five senses?
The five, I'll explain. The five senses are given to us in the gross body
Yeah.
to perceive the entire gross world. Correct? These five senses are useless once
Okay.
you enter into the subtle sphere. There you have different senses altogether. Different eye through which you see the subtle world, different ear through which you hear the subtle sounds, different nose through which you experience the subtle smell, etc., etc. So there is no comparison. It's not a difference in degree. It's a difference in kind, and which we
Okay.
cannot understand, or I cannot explain, because we have not
Okay.
reached that stage.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Farida,
Thank you.
like to
Welcome.
know, Farida would to know.
Farida, I would like to know if Baba spoke. I have not come across any reading where Baba talks about Dasturji, Puka Daru Sahib. No, I have not come across any reading. The only reference that Baba gave was of Dastur Azhar Kaiwan, who Baba said was during Baba's time. Now, if somebody is there, I do not know. Baba said that he was the last perfect master who has become perfect through who belong to the Zoroastrian religion. But beyond that, no.
Neha Daruwala has a question.
She asked just now.
Cyrus, Jai Baba.
1 minute. Do the avatars have to pass through all these stages? No. The avatar never passes through. That is the difference between the avatar and the perfect master. The perfect masters become perfect through going through all this process. They are never born perfect. They are born in the third plane, second plane, third plane, fourth plane, whatever that may be. But they become perfect in that particular lifetime, where the avatar is already perfected. The only thing is the avatar comes with a veil around him, and the veil is removed by one of the five perfect masters. In this time and age, Hazrat Babajan did that job, and he is there. He doesn't have to pass through any of these stages.
Are there
Right, right. But one sec, one sec.
Okay.
So the other day it was told that Christ had stationed himself on the fourth plane.
Right.
That we want to know. That was a deliberate action on his part,
Yes.
like sufferings.
Yes, yes, yes. Because he was supposed to do or perform a lot of miracles, and plane 4, actually he could have done it from any plane. You see, he doesn't need to, but that is what Baba in his literature has written, that because his job was to perform lots of miracles, and plane 4 is the plane of miracles, he stationed himself. That doesn't mean that he was of the fourth plane. He was of the supramental, as we call it, you know.
That was for the whole Avtaric period or some duration?
During the time he was there as the avatar.
The whole Avtaric period he stationed himself
I
on
don't know. I have no clue, but Baba did say that he stationed himself on the fourth plane because he was required to perform lots of miracles. Perhaps for the entire Avtaric period, till such time as he did his Avtaric work, but I am not sure. I have not read anything of that sort.
That may be the reason he was calling himself as the Son of God.
Maybe. Yeah, anybody has any
Are
question?
there
Yes, sir.
Jai Baba.
I would
Cyrus.
see now what is happening. People are typing
Cyrus.
questions. Yes, Bhikkhu, go ahead.
No, I want to share.
Yes, please.
In the first chapter, you said about the Om point, if you remember.
Yes.
You talked about the Om point.
Yes, sir.
Now, my memory goes right. I
Yes,
think so that there was one Baba lover by the name of Kent. I don't remember his first name.
Okay.
He was working for the. He was a government employee,
Yes.
and he was working for the Rashtrapati Bhavan.
Okay.
And I think so. He took Baba to the Rashtrapati Bhavan also.
Okay.
And in one of the rooms, Baba said that this is the Om point, Karin. He pointed out in one of the rooms of Rashtrapati Bhavan. I have read it. I don't know how far it is true.
No idea. I have not read it, so I can't say anything. But Baba did say something to do with Java, Sumatra, Java and all those places
closest to
which are closest to the Om point. But I don't know about, I have not read, so I can't comment on it, Bhikkhu.
Are there any examples of
Are there, okay, Bhikkhu? My
Yes, sir.
answer is I don't know. Huh?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, dear. Are there any examples of any living person in the subtle and mental stage? I am definitely sure there may be several. There are definitely 5 perfect masters and several living, but you mean presently living? I don't know who all are there, but definitely Baba spoke about so many of the musts and so many of the saints. For example, Baba talked about Gadge Maharaj as living on the 6th plane, which means the mental plane of who was that the gentleman who took
Bachi?
Babji was on the 6th plane. Then Chacha was on the 7th plane, Mazhub Kamil. Then Muhammad was on between the 3rd and the 4th.
When he came
But Baba put him on the 5th. Then there was this the one who took Sufism, who was this? Inayat Khan. He was on the 6th plane. So like that, Baba did make references during that time. But presently, who is where, I don't know. She's asking for living
Thank you,
living
Cyrus.
person, I don't know. Living person, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
1 minute. What is the Ram Nori saying? I think so. Don't people pray to Shirdi Sai Baba? Means what?
Yeah,
Can you come? No, let Ram Nori ask the question because I don't follow the question.
No, somebody asked if they can pray to a perfect master.
Oh, yeah, of course you can pray. Why not? You can pray to anybody. You can pray to yourself also. Yeah, why
Even I
not?
don't do it.
Ultimately, Asha, okay. No. I'm Asha, okay. Dilshad, you have a question?
Yes, please.
Saraji, I'm a little confused when you said that a person who is in either of the three planes, either of the three worlds would not be conscious of the other world. Like if it is gross, then he only
Right,
knows of
right,
gross. If it is
right,
mental, then only,
right,
right?
right.
So then when you're talking of a person being able to be in a particular plane and do miracles and then having arrived, so how is that possible? Because he is in the human form and he is aware of only of the human gross form. So as a human being, how would he go to those planes?
Okay, let me first understand the question. You mean to say, supposing somebody is in the third plane or fourth plane, and he is creating a miracle. Am I right in understanding of raising somebody who is dead
Yeah.
and giving him life? Right?
Anything, yes.
Anything, anything. See, basically, what Baba says is, this is very important to understand, that their consciousness is focused on that particular plane, but they do things in all the other planes unconsciously. Unconsciously doesn't mean that how we get unconscious, but indirectly they use that plane. I'll give you a simple example. A person in the sixth plane, let us say Gadge Maharaj, he used to do jharu of the roads. So obviously he was seeing some dirt on the road. Am I right? Or he used to eat, he used to walk around, he used to sleep, he used to talk. All these activities pertain to the gross. Am I right? So you may say, how can he do all these activities in the gross when he is on the sixth plane? And Baba says that he is not aware of the gross. Am I making sense, Dilshad? Is that what
Yes,
you are asking?
yes.
So Baba says
Yes, yes.
that
As
although
a human being, then how can he reach that plane?
Baba says that although he may appear to be doing things which we see as a gross, actually his focus is on the spiritual, the subtle or the mental plane. I'll give you two examples. Somebody asked that, now for example, I'll just give you an example. For example, we are all in the gross, at least I am. So how do I see Baba? How do I recognize Baba? Through his gross form. Why? Because my Nazariya is gross and I am seeing only his gross. Those who are on the subtle plane will not see his gross body, but he will see his energy body. Those who are on the mental plane would see him as mind. And those who are on the supramental state will see him as God. So, jaisi hamari nazariya, hamari drashtikon, where we are, we will only see that portion. That is one way of explaining why we see those on the higher planes performing mundane, simple acts on the gross plane. Second example, I can give three. This was first. Number two is a somnambulist. I've given this example earlier. Somebody who gets up in the middle of the night, walks to the fridge, opens the door, takes out a nice bottle of Carlsberg beer and pours it in a glass, opens the cheese slice, gobbles up the cheese and goes to bed. Now I am seeing that he's getting up.
Sleepwalking.
No, correct. He's sleepwalking, somnambulist. But does he know that he's doing this? That's what I'm trying to say. No, he doesn't know. His consciousness is somewhere else. But he's actually doing this. And I, who is watching, is a witness to his doing this. So when he gets up in the morning and if I tell him, Baba, you did this, he will not agree. He will not accept it because his consciousness was not in the doingness of what he was doing. Number two. Number three. So this is we just conjured up a third example of what we call as, what is it called? You know, what is it? That show, shadow play. There's a name called
Night and sound,
no, something like a shadow play, but there's a certain
night and sound, yeah.
There's a certain name.
Supri.
No, anyway, so you know what I'm talking about. So basically, there's a light and there's
Puppet.
a person standing there, and he's
Shadow
the
play, yeah.
it is shadow. So what is it called? No.
Shadow.
Anyway. Let's not get into that. There's a name, but
Puppet show, puppet.
No. Puppet show is totally different.
Sonne Lumiere?
Sorry?
Sonne Lumiere?
No.
With a finger.
Pinole.
It plays with the shadow of the head.
Okay, forget the name. Forget the let's मुद्दे पे आ जाते हैं. What you are seeing on the screen is one deer is being chased by a leopard and coming closer and closer and pounces on the deer. Whatever. You are seeing that. The experience is that. But is that actually happening? No. That is something different. So in other words, what you are seeing is not what is actually happening. So in the same way, those on the subtle world, in the subtle world, and in the mental world are focused consciously on that sphere only. But to us, it appears that they are behaving like a normal, gross, conscious human being. They may come and you might give them some food. So they will bless you and eat the food and then walk away. They are eating, they are sleeping, they are walking, they are talking, but they are not conscious of what they are doing. Their consciousness is focused on that particular plane. So that is the explanation I can give as best as I can based on what I have read in Baba's literature. That those who are in the subtle plane are not conscious of the gross, are not conscious of the mental, are not conscious of the supramental, and so on and so forth. Okay.
And yet they are still in the gross body.
The gross body, good. The gross body will continue to remain until you become God realized. Even that God realization also has to be had only in the gross body. You cannot have the experience of God realization after you have dropped the gross body. No, that experience can be of moksha or mukti, which is the ordinary mukti or najat mukti, which you can have maybe after 3 to 5 days after leaving your gross body. That's what Baba explains.
So when Gadke Maharaj is sweeping and working as a gross body, he is not aware, or we are not aware of what he's doing on the sixth plane.
We are aware. We are seeing that he is doing jharu pocha. We are aware, because we are gross. We are seeing his gross actions.
But he is not aware. Am I right?
That's what Baba says. That yes, they are not aware of what is happening in the gross. Their consciousness.
Thank you so much.
I mean, it's a little intriguing though, and the only way to do it is when Dilshad and I go into the subtle world. Then we can know and discuss that. Oh yes, that we are not gross at all. But right now, being in the gross world, we cannot know what is the experience of the subtle or the mental. Forget about the supramental. Yes, Mayor Krupa? Mayor Krupa?
No, thank you. I was just clapping for you are going to
Okay. Thank you.
Paris uncle, I have a small question.
Please ask the small question, Priya. Who's asking? Oh, yeah.
Yes, Priya. We are in the 3D, we are in the third plane, right?
Sorry?
Yeah, 3D.
The human beings are in the third plane.
Gross. What third plane? We are in the gross. Sthul Bhumika. Gross plane. Gross. Baba says gross, subtle, mental, supramental.
And these are the different planes. Third, fourth.
No, they are not the planes. Okay, you can take. Okay, fine. They are actually the spheres. But in the sphere or the world, which is called the subtle world, you have the first, second, and the third plane purely in the subtle world. The fourth is a go between like a threshold, the subtle and the mental, and the fifth and the sixth planes are in the mental world. Okay, go on.
And has Baba said anything about what kind of struggle a human being would experience as it moves from the third plane to the fourth plane to the fifth plane? Like in this specific plane, we deal with suffer from shame, anger, worry. And so does that change as one progresses over the spiritual path?
In my understanding, yes. the emotions may continue over there as well, but they are of a different texture, they are of a different kind. There is this limited ego, the urge to create miracles, the urge for self-aggrandizing, so that limited, finite, separative I, or the ego, or the self, I'm talking about the small self, continues all the way till the sixth plane of consciousness. And Baba says that the temptation of the inner world, these are called inner world, they call it inner world, are much more stupendous as compared to the temptation of the gross world. In the gross, what temptation do we have? To amass wealth, to make to make bungalows and this and that. But they have a different type of temptation, you see. So if you are asking that question, then and they have to struggle with that as well, that they are not supposed to make use of those powers, and there is a temptation to make use of it. And that is the reason why Baba never advocates any kind of. The other day somebody was asking me on a personal telephone about Kundalini Jagrut Karne ka, that kind of yogic processes and all that. And Baba has never, they are there. I'm not saying no. They are the subtle chakras, the energy centers. They are not in the physical body. They are in the subtle world. And if you are not in the subtle world and being in the gross world, trying to access the subtle energy points, there is a very, very high probability you may touch it. You may, like putting a matchstick, it might just erupt, and you may not know how to handle the energies which are unleashed because of the premature opening up of certain subtle senses or centers. And that's why Baba never ever advocated these kinds of spiritual gymnastics, you may say. And the best, safest, surest, quickest way is to remember Baba wholeheartedly as much as we can in the midst of our daily activities. That I feel is the best part and the safest part. I don't know whether I answered your question, Priya.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
Cyrus,
Anybody else? Yes, Rakesh.
Yeah, I want to just clarify once again.
Sure.
The one we talked about, Jesus coming back and stationing himself to the fourth plane. Is it that the consciousness is also limited to that one plane, or it's permeable to all the planes? His actions are based, focused in that plane, or it's he doesn't have any consciousness of the lower three and the upper two.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He has no consciousness. Correct. So he plays around that realm only. No, he doesn't have consciousness. He doesn't. You're right, Rakesh. He does not have consciousness of the lower one and the upper two. What you're saying is absolutely correct. He doesn't have the consciousness, and he is only circumscribed to the subtle world only, and not only just the subtle world, but confined to that plane only. Subtle world has three planes: first, second, and third, basically. So he's confined to that only, and he is responsible, accountable, and answerable of the actions that he takes within those planes. No, but are you talking about Jesus Christ? One sec.
Yeah. Christ, he's talking of the avatar who's conscious of everything.
Dilshad, one second. Sorry, I'm sorry, Rakesh. Did you talk about Jesus Christ?
Correct. Yes.
Or what did you say about Jesus Christ?
Like you said, no, he.
No, of course. See, with Jesus Christ, it's a different matter.
I'm talking of the avatar, right?
Yeah. So he has consciousness of everything.
Everything, right?
Cross subtle and mental. I'm sorry, I missed something else. But if a person on a particular plane, then he's confined only to that plane.
The avatar has the consciousness of all the planes. Everywhere.
Yeah. He can move around anywhere. He can move around anywhere all the time. Yeah. He's free to move around anywhere.
Thank you.
Okay, Dilshad, you had something to say?
I was just pointing out the same thing because he's the avatar.
Yeah. Soumya did point out to me, but as usual, I did not listen to her. And then finally I had to. All right. Any more questions, or we call it a day? That's over now. It's almost 6:11. All right. See you on Monday. See you all on.
Question.
Of course, Saturday is there. Saturday Dubai would be.
Saturday.
We have Dhoni today, na?
Yes, we have Dhoni today. Yes.
Jai
At
Baba
6:45.
Cyrus sir and Sonia
Jai
ma'am.
Baba. Thank you.
Jyoti,
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you,
Jai
Cyrus.
Baba.
Jai Baba.
Baba.
Thank you.
Baba,
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba,
Jai
Cyrus and
Baba. Jai
Sonia.
Baba.
Thank you so much.
Sarahji.
Thank you.
Thank
Jai
you.
Baba.
Thank
Jai
you.
Jai
Baba.
Baba Cyrus.
Jai Baba.
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Jai Baba,
Thank you,
everybody.
Cyrus and
Jai
Sonia.
Baba.
Jai
Thank
Baba.
Cyrus and
you.
Sonia, it
Thank
was very
you.
nice.
Thank you.
Very
Jai
nice.
Thank you so much.
It was
Jai
so
Meher Baba
lovely.
Cyrus ji.
Thank you.
Jai Meher Baba.
Jai Meher Baba.
Jai Meher Baba.
Ah, Jai Meher Baba.
Jai Meher Baba. Thank you, Cyrus and Sonia.
Jai Baba, Cyrus.